Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio on this rainy Monday. I'm in Manchester and the weather is predictably cold and rainy and drizzly today as many people go back to school, whether that be for inset days or for actually starting to teach. Huge news today has been, well, the timeline really was last night when it came out via some of tomorrow's papers, notably from the Metro and the Telegraph, that OFSTED grades, OFSTED one-word judgments were going to be scrapped with immediate effect. I don't know if this came as a surprise to people. It certainly came as a surprise to me that it would happen right now. I was a little bit confused when I saw it in terms of having the run-in time, having the sort of, you imagine that head teachers will have been going back today to address staff and talk to them about, probably knowing how things go. They'll have said, oh, we've got an inspection due in a week or whatever it would be. And then that whole conversation changes, I guess, in terms of what the outcome process is going to be from that, what that accountability looks like. Because these one-word judgments have now been abolished from now. It's effective as of now. They're gone. What is remaining, as it stands, are the subcategories for grades within the report. So they're keeping the outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate for the different areas of the report. There's different areas of the OFSTED report in its entirety. So, for example, behaviours and attitudes would get its own subgrades, and that, I suppose a question from today is, what does that mean? Does that mean that the subgrades are suddenly going to take on this almost like a replacement for the one-word judgment? Are they going to be something that becomes something that's nearly as bad as the one-word judgment, but not quite as bad? Or does it really matter that they're keeping those subgrades in? They're not going to be on the card. They're not going to be in that external thing. Right? Is a school outstanding, good, requires? It's obviously going to be much more difficult to say that now, because you are going to have to look at the report. But I tweeted sort of half an hour ago my sort of personal worries on this around schools sort of. Well, number one, I think there'll be a certain proportion who will still buy in to whatever accountability system that the government or Ofsted put in place. Many bought into the one-word judgments. And in the same way, people will buy into the subgrades, because it will allow someone to say we are mostly outstanding or good or whatever they want to say. If someone wants to do that, there's still an opportunity to do it. I think one of the questions is it better to get rid of everything? Is it even better to get rid of Ofsted in its current form? I know that got rubbished, and even Julia Waters, the sister of Ruth Perry, did come out a number of months ago and say that she didn't think that abolishing Ofsted or getting shut of Ofsted as a body was the way forward. But there are many who do think that, and there are many just in the group, I guess, above that, who think, no, we'll keep Ofsted, but all manner of grades need to go. There is a large group in there who would say all grades need to go, because if you still have some grades there is still scope for problems. There is still scope for unreliability. The same issues remain in terms of the length of the inspections, having human beings doing it. You're always going to get different perceptions coming through. You have the debates around the focus of inspection that still exist. We've switched to this curriculum focus away from looking at things like progress 8 as much, or the exam results. We've looked at curriculum more. Does that stay in place? That's proven in some ways controversially. It's, again, there will be those who would argue that there were those that would say that the moving of stripping out the main grade and replacing it, I say replacing it, but still having the sub levels, the subgrades for the different areas, is sort of like 25% better, but it's not 100% better. It's a bit better than not. And then there'll also be those who would argue that the move in 2019 to the new Ofsted framework, where it focused on curriculum, was a bit better, but it still left all that scope and space for system manipulation and for inaccuracy and for problems with what's being judged and how it's being judged, and all the debates that have gone on for many, many, many years, long before the death of Ruth Perry. There's been debates about inspection for as long as I've been teaching anyway. So that's the news that has hit us today. Now, obviously, if anybody who's listening, and thanks everybody who's joined us initially here, if anybody wants to sort of join in with the conversation, all you have to do is hit the little microphone icon in the bottom left, the little blue microphone icon, and you can join in the conversation, share your view on this. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it goes far enough? Maybe you even think it's a bad thing. I mean, certainly the shadow education secretary. Do you know what? I just stumbled then when I said shadow, because I'm just not used to it. But the shadow education secretary, Damien Hines, came out with that sort of, long trodden line around parents not being, not having something to go on with the main grades being removed. So I think that's an interesting line. That's a line that's always existed. I think the pushback on that has been there's those who've said, well, that's not what parents really want. I know Gillian Keegan came out this morning on LBC and said, well, we're patronising parents if we think they can't read a report. But on the flip side of that, there'll be those who say parents don't have time to read a report, and they just want a short, sharp delivery of a one word to help them decide on XYZ. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Is this the start of a process? Well, obviously it is, because next September 2025, Labour are planning to introduce their new report card system, which will, I guess, replace everything. So this idea of the subgrades being in place, I'm not sure sort of what happens after September 2025 to the subgrades. Do they just go and then we end up with this new report card system, or do they stay on some level? It'll be interesting to see what happens next September and what the plan is in that respect. And as I say, I think that Gillian Keegan is going to have her work cut out, in the sense that this announcement, I've seen criticism from some CEOs, like Stuart Locke, for example, has criticised this and said it should have been planned out, it should have been mapped out, there should have been advance warning, etc., etc. There's been many, many others who have greeted it with applause, and they've been very happy with it. I've got Flora Cooper here. Flora, good evening to you.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Oh, it's good to hear from you.
Good to speak to you.
Now, tell me, what's your take on this?
I mean, I think it's great news. I think also a huge thanks to Edmund, Barnett Ward, and Julia Waters, because they have literally been relentless. And I think it shows a good move, definitely, because they are listening. But as you said, we still have yet to see what happens and what the result will be. Will it just become a report card of these grades, which then, schools then surmise, well, because we've got so many outstandings in these areas, we are overall outstanding. And will it just come back to that?
I mean, what was your sort of initial? Were you shocked when this came out, or were you sort of no? Even with the immediate effect part.
No, I wasn't. I think they were, from kind of things that had been happening. I could tell, and you could kind of tell that something major was going to happen. And I think it's kind of their way of saying we are listening. But again, it's how are they listening, and how are they now going to use the teaching profession? How are they really going to show that they're listening to us and working with us? And I think that's going to be the major thing that comes out from this now. And moving forwards, that's going to be the biggest thing. We need an accountability system, absolutely. But we need a system that works with us and supports us, because ultimately, isn't the aim for every school to be as great as it can be? And therefore, I think we need a system that works with us, with inspectors who are absolutely clear about what they're inspecting. They know the ins and outs of the context they're inspecting. So if they're secondary teachers, they're in secondary schools. If they're primary head teachers, they're in primary schools. And, I think that needs to be the consistency across the board.
Do you think that the thing that Phillipson said about the subgrades, sort of, I don't know whether you heard that part, but she was basically saying the subgrades will remain in the report, and they will still be used to sort of, well, for example, she said that if somebody got inadequate in an area, so out of the 4, she sort of gave a bit of a wishy-washy answer on whether that would mean forced academisation. She sort of implied that it would still mean forced academisation to get one sub-area inadequate. So my question is this just one of them where it's slightly better than what we've got, but only slightly? Is it because I tweeted about half an hour ago saying, no, does this mean we're going to end up with people saying we're mostly outstanding because we got 3 out of the 4? So instead of calling ourselves outstanding, we're going to call ourselves mostly outstanding or 75% outstanding. What do you think?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think only time is going to tell, because at the moment, we already almost, we have the subgrades. It's just we're not going to have the overall grading of each school. But absolutely what you say is that is what schools are going to do. We have to remember that whatever Ofsted puts as its sort of expectation, schools are going to do whatever they have to do to fit into Ofsted's remit. So whatever Ofsted say, schools will change the script to make sure that they are doing exactly what Ofsted are wanting.
Right. Yeah, but do you think it's sort of kidding people when people say, well, I'm not doing it for Ofsted, and they say they're doing the opposite of that? Because people do say the opposite of what you've just said. They say, no, we don't do that. Do you just think that those people are fibbing a little bit?
No, I think there are genuinely people who try to do I think all head teachers are in it, and all school teachers are in it to do the best for their children. But unfortunately, because of the system that we have, we we do everything we can to make sure that we're fitting into that system because we want to do well by Ofsted. But I think genuinely there are people who say they don't do things for Ofsted because they genuinely are doing it for their pupils.
Before we carry on, yeah, absolutely. Before we carry on the conversation any further, and before I forget, it would be wonderful for me to mention our fantastic sponsors on the show tonight. We've got Futurum Careers. If you haven't heard of them, they offer free resources that help with the teaching of STEM and SHAPE subjects, particularly for 14 to 19-year-olds. You can find out more about them at futurumcareers.com. There's a little pinned tweet in the space as well if you're listening live. You can explore that. You can subscribe to them. They'll send you an email every week or two with their latest drop of free resources. Well worth checking that out because it's completely free. You also have John Catt Educational, our old friends, our old fantastic friends at John Catt, who still offer 20% off any book on their website through Teachers Talk Radio using the code JCTTR2425 on the website johncattbookshop.com. So head over there. If you want to order a book, don't forget to use our code and get 20% off. And actually, you can use that on any number of books that you get on the website. We've also got Mary Bowstead here. Good evening, Mary. How are you? Hopefully, you can unmute yourself bottom left with a bit of luck.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Hello. Sorry. It's just like COVID all over again, isn't it? Perhaps you can unmute yourself.
I think, you know what I think it is, Mary. I think you've been spending too long out of the job now. I think you've gone into just, you're too relaxed now. You're too relaxed.
That must be it.
Listen, well, you know what? Before I ask you about this whole Ofsted thing, which is huge, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing since you finished at NEU. Just tell us.
Yeah, well, okay then. So finished the NEU at the end of August last year. We lived in France for 3 months because I wanted to get my French back up to a reasonable level. Really enjoyed that. Came back just before Christmas, and since then I've been quite busy. Really, I'm doing various things, doing quite a lot of consultancy work, and doing some writing, and keeping busy.
Superb. Well, listen. Let me ask you about today because it's been a pretty monumental day in the sort of history of Ofsted today, hasn't it? So what's your reaction to it all?
So I think it is a monumental day. I think it's a very important day because it's a fairly fundamental admission by Ofsted that it's got some things very badly wrong. Included in that is its relationship with the profession, its response to Ruth Perry's death, and its aspects of its inspection process. It's admitted also that there are, it's not formally admitted this, but the new emphasis on SEND and inclusion is, I think, an admission that it has not concentrated on those areas in the past and has allowed a very stratified pupil intake, with certain schools taking more than their fair share of pupils with SEND and more of their fair share with disadvantaged pupils, and other schools essentially massaging their intake. So I think it's the proposals around inspector training, around quality assurance, around rewriting the early years framework, and around the safeguarding around the correct complaints process now. The admission that the regional teams have had inconsistent line management. I think it's a fairly fundamental admission that things have gone really quite badly wrong. And that's to be welcomed, because previously Ofsted's line has been never apologise, never complain. And they have now admitted that, actions that they've taken, policies that they've adopted, have not worked, or indeed in some respects have made things worse. And its root cause, I think, its root admission is that Ofsted have not really succeeded in quality control, which is a charge I've laid against them for the last 20 years, that actually Ofsted has got away with impunity about shoddy work from its own inspectorate because it could.
Do you think? Here's a question for you, Mary, because you were obviously right at the top of the NEU for several years now. But if the Labour government had come in 2019, do you think they'd have done the same thing, or do you think this has been very much driven by what happened with Ruth Perry?
I think what happened, the tragedy of Ruth Perry, was a catalyst to something had to happen, something had to change. And it took her death to really gear that up so it became inevitable. What Ruth Perry's tragic death did was crystallise all the intellectual arguments which had been made about Ofsted's performance and its effect upon the system. But I do think that there would have been change, because I think Labour were convinced that Ofsted was creating real problems in the system. And I think in particular, the teacher supply crisis, with less than half teacher training places being filled last year and the year before, and it's likely to be even worse this year, and with a third of teachers leaving within 5 years, that that supply crisis, so much of that can be laid down on the effect of accountability and in particular inspection on the culture and atmosphere in schools, and the intensification of work which comes from having an inspection system which is unreliable, where different inspectors want different things, where different inspectors have different bees in their bonnets, where different inspectors will have different quality inspection judgments based on their ability or otherwise to synthesize the evidence before them. And that's driven so much of the repressive culture in too many schools, and so much of the frankly ridiculously excessive workload. And I think Labour were convinced by those arguments, and we're moving to say that Ofsted needed to change. Whether it would have happened as quickly as it has, I think, is another question, but I think it would have happened.
And what do you think about the sub-levels staying in place, the subgrades staying in place? Do you think that is unwise, that if they were going to do this in a short burst, which they've done, they should have just done the whole lot now?
I think that we're in a transitional year. And I think they've got a year now. Labour's got a year to get the policy around the report card right. I don't think that will be easy to do. I think that's fraught with difficulty itself, because the danger is the report card can just become a huge set of metrics which the system then rushes around to try to provide evidence for, and can lead to other intended consequences. So I'm clear
Lethal
that,
mutations, as they always say.
yeah. So I'm clear that the abolition of a one-word grade is the start of the reform. But if it's going to end up in a good place, which doesn't have, I mean, there will always be unintended consequences, but doesn't have a whole host of unintended consequences, then a huge amount of detailed thinking needs to go into, I think, two key questions. One is, what are the aspects of education quality do we want to measure, and how do we do that? Because I don't think you can take it for granted that Ofsted's current framework, or indeed previous frameworks, really do measure education quality. They measure proxies that Ofsted have put forward for measurements of education quality. They measure things that can be measured. So there's a real question about, do Ofsted judgments really reflect education quality, or do they reflect other things like the quality of a school's intake, where the school's situated, etc., etc. So that's the first thing. What do we want to measure, and how do we measure it validly? And the second key question is, how do we get reliable inspection judgments? Because in fact, Ofsted has set themselves a much higher bar now. I remember Amanda Spielman, in her next to last report as Her Majesty's Chief Inspector, saying, we don't take into account a school's context. We measure education quality, and we measure that whether it's, in a poor school in Hull or a school in the leafy suburbs in Chelsea. So she was very clear that the context in which a school's placed had no impact on the outcome. And she then sought to justify that by saying schools in poor areas find it more difficult to recruit and retain staff. My question to her was, well, why is that, Amanda? Because a lot of the reasons for that is laid in addition to the very challenging work in those schools, in addition to encountering poverty every day and trying to deal with it, teachers have to deal with your unfair judgments. But she wasn't having that. She was saying, no, we inspect without fear or favour. All I'm saying is if Ofsted go in and now as they purport to do, they're going to take into account the context in which the schools works. That raises a whole host of other questions which are really difficult to answer. So what effect will the context be on the judgment? Does that mean you'll have different measures of educational quality for schools in different areas? Or does it mean that the measure will be how much progress the pupils have made from them starting? Is that the measure of education quality that will be used? All those are really fundamental and different questions, and we're going to have answers to that in a year's time. So this is just, if anybody thinks this is the end, this is just the end of the very beginning. There's a huge amount that now needs to be considered and answered.
But Mary, I'm going to sort of give you another angle on this as well. And Flora, by the way, feel free to come in on this as well. And James as well, who's joined us and probably was in school today. So as the sort of on the ground thing, and Flora does as well as the executive head teacher, to tell us what that was going to be one of my questions in a bit, was like, what's the teacher reaction to this? What's the leader reaction to this? Does it alleviate pressure straight away, or does it just carry on? But before we get on to that, so I'll pitch this to you, Mary, but also anyone else, feel free to come in. Catherine Burblesing's come out today, and she said that it's a nod in the quote, it's a nod in the wrong direction. And she said that abolishing judgments because of leaders feeling bad is a nod in the wrong direction. It's an indulgence of the tyranny of feelings being more important than facts. And the reasoning behind the decision worries me, re this government's future decisions. This report card will not give more clarity to parents. That's bluster from the politicians. And the Telegraph have run a poll, which has been voted on by 22,200 people so far. Do you prefer one-word Ofsted ratings? Yes, 62%. No, 38%. Now, I understand that the Telegraph is a right-leaning newspaper. Of course it is. But it does give you an indication that there is a swell of opinion that is not like it is in the teaching profession, which is mainly against this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Yes, so Catherine Burblesing, of course, is entitled to her views. I don't normally agree with her views. I don't always disagree with her, actually, but I don't. It's not routinely I don't agree with her. I mean, that's got quite a verbose quote, and I don't quite know what she means. And she's tying that into future decision making by a Labour government. So, she's entitled to her opinion. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, and for parents, yes, they might well prefer a grade. If you just ask the question straight off, do you prefer a grade? That's quite likely to be an answer because that appears to be simple. I think it requires greater knowledge of Ofsted and its effect to engage with the wider consequences of the regime that teachers and leaders have endured over the last 30 years. Remember, this is an agency which has changed its framework 5 times in the past 10 years, where any sense that you compare a school that was inspected 7 years ago, which got good, with a school which is inspecting now, which gets good, there's no comparison. It's an agency which has gone around in search of a framework which it can justify, which has used metrics which it can measure, which I don't think really measure education quality, and which has created a storm of discontent in the profession, leading us to be, in international terms, one of the most surveyed and surveillanced professions, if you can use the word surveillance, you probably can't, in the OECD. That's led to a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. And you can't subject you can't subject graduates to excessive workloads, intensification of work, and inappropriate accountability measures and expect them to either want to join or to remain in the profession. So in the end, if your inspection system is having such catastrophic effects upon the attractiveness of the profession, which means that you can't get teachers, particularly in socially deprived areas, to teach core subjects, If you get those children being taught by, to a much greater degree, teachers are not qualified in the age phase or the subject that they're teaching, and that's happening on an industrial scale, particularly for pupils who most need qualified teachers, then you have to ask fundamental questions about the inspection regime. Now, I wouldn't necessarily expect the majority of Telegraph readers to bring all those different thoughts and knowledge to bear on that simple question. It would take quite a lot of unpacking, which a simple poll can't do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I just thought I'd mention that poll in the sense of the sort of swell of opinion there, I guess. But you're absolutely right in pointing out what you've said. I wanted to ask you as well, Amanda, that sorry, Amanda. Oh, Mary.
Please.
Mary, I'm sorry to say that. It's such
Please,
a
Tom.
Yeah. Anyway, Amanda, no, I'm joking. Mary, Amanda Spielman said today, and I wondered whether you were surprised by this. She said the decision to scrap one-word judgments would be, quote, beneficial for inspectors, schools, parents, and children.
Well, she may well have thought of that for some time. I mean,
she never said it though, did she?
No. Well, she, as a chief inspector, she couldn't have said that while she was chief inspector, because it wasn't in her gift. I mean, it was. I mean,
oh, now you're using her language,
I have been
Mary.
extremely
Please
critical of Amanda
never
Spielman.
Use the word. Please
I've
never
been
use
extremely
the phrase.
critical of Amanda Spielman, but I don't want to unfairly criticise her for something which she had no say over. The one-word judgment was never going to go under a Tory government.
No, that's fair, but please never use the language "if it's in my gift," because that's the phrase that she used repeatedly.
All right.
But you're absolutely, but you're right in a factual sense of what you said. I think there has been some backlash for the last year or two in the sense that some, and being totally transparent, including myself on a personal level, have sort of seen a lot of sort of blocking and dismissing, and maybe I think many have seen the sort of reaction towards Julia Waters in particular as quite negative at times, and quite unempathetic, and quite just I don't know, like this has been, I wonder whether this decision, like the Conservative government under Gillian Keegan could have made this decision in February 2023. They could have. I'm not saying politically they were ever going to do that, but they could have, and they would have had justification. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying there. There's no question there. It's more just a statement.
So I think, to go to sort of what I think is the heart of what you're saying, if you read, because I quickly read, it's under embargo, but I got it sent to me by a journalist, Dame Christine Gilbert's report of Ofsted's reaction to Ruth Perry's death. And that is a very interesting report, and very critical of Ofsted's reaction, of the comms, of the reaction within Ofsted, of the communications within Ofsted, and the communications with Ruth Perry's family, and the communications with the profession and with the public generally. And reading that report, there's a whole series of recommendations around training in Ofsted, around the role of the Ofsted board in holding the chief inspector accountable, which at the moment that's not the role of the Ofsted board, so that's changing. And there's a whole host of, I think, very good recommendations. But the other thing that Christine Gilbert lays bare in her report, I think it's a very interesting section, is that in real terms, Ofsted is funded 29% less in real terms than it was 20 years ago. Its remit has expanded hugely. And Christine Gilbert says quite clearly that there's going to be no more money. It's not a top priority, but the question has to be asked, to what quality can Ofsted do the inspections that it's required to do under the funding that it's got? And I think that's a real issue. If the agency isn't funded to do the work, then that has impact on the quality of the work. And she mentions in her report inspectors staying in substandard accommodation, working 14-hour days, etc., etc. And I think that's a problem as well. So as I say, I think that a whole host of serious issues have been raised, a whole series of weaknesses and fault lines have been exposed. I think the other thing in the report is very interesting about the new measures for quality assurance, both about the conduct of inspections, but also about the content and the judgments in inspection reports. All of this points to a very clear admission by Ofsted that the quality control has simply not been good enough.
Mary, feel free to stick around. You've probably got to go.
I've got to go, but
yeah, thank you
I'm
so
very
much.
glad I finally made it onto Teachers Talk Radio.
Listen, well, actually, you did once, but it was like 2 years ago. So this is like
it's dashed from a memory. But thanks for
it was about
inviting me on,
Oak
Tom.
National. It was about Oak National Academy.
Oh right. Oh yes, I remember.
You remember?
I remember
It was a long time
ago.
But anyway,
yeah, it was.
Mary, thanks ever so much, and take care, and speak to you soon.
Now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Flora, I wanted to ask you next about you as a leader. Will this decision make any difference to the way you approach inspection, your next inspection of a school?
I mean, I don't think there's enough information for us to change anything at all at the moment. And I am one of those heads who says we don't do things for Ofsted. But as much as I say that, obviously Ofsted is always at the back of your mind. Of course it is, of course. But I think we will continue to do what we do for the children and to put the children at the heart of everything we do, because that is what I would hope Ofsted come in and see and realize that we are doing the right thing for our kids.
Yeah. I'll bring James in brief. James, are you there? James has waited incredibly patiently to speak, and I feel really bad. James, can you? There you go.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Listen, I want to. Well, first of all, have you been in school today?
Tomorrow. Today was our last day of summer holiday, so I'm in for our inset day tomorrow, I'm afraid, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm afraid. I love it. Well, I was only going to ask you, there might be a slight delay, by the way, James. I don't know if there is or there isn't, but I'll carry on talking anyway. But I wanted to ask you what your view on this is. Are you sort of feeling positive about what's happened here, or are you just nonplussed, or are you just neutral? Like, what's your take on this massive sort of thing that's happened this morning?
No, I don't have a lot to add. Not a strong opinion on it. I see the value in having a balanced scorecard, I guess, across the piece, because it's such a broad area in schools, from lesson observations, teaching and learning, safeguarding. But one thing I would say is we did actually have our inspection a couple of months ago. So mid-May, we did get the call.
Yeah.
I think the call came in on a Monday. Ofsted were in Wednesday and Thursday. I guess intense for the departments, but it came out okay. That the inspection wasn't a problem. I did sense that they were asking some good questions around well-being in the department sessions. But yeah, I guess we were, one of the last ones of the old regime. So I guess overall, yeah, I'm quite new to the profession, only 4 years in, but I think a balanced scorecard view is probably better, but we'll see where it pans out.
It's going to be interesting. I'm going to be speaking to James in a bit about inset days, the best and worst, which will be entertaining, I'm sure. Flora, in terms of this with regards to staff, do you think it'll make a difference in any way, the announcement today, or do you think it's just negligible in terms of the way actual teachers feel on an individual level?
I mean, I think the change today has been massive. We have to take into account that's a massive change and a massive. It's in the right direction, and I think it shows that Ofsted are listening. But again, I think everyone has heard today the great news, and they think, okay, but now it's what's next. So again, I think it's all going to be in the next year what actually this report card system is going to look like. I think the biggest thing that we need to do, and I think the biggest thing that Ofsted need to realize is that we have got to take this competition away from pitting schools against each other, which is what the whole grading system does. Because ultimately, as I said, hopefully, the DFE want every school in England to be the best that it possibly can be. And by creating this competition between schools, we create a system where we are all in competition. And so people close their doors and don't want to sort of let loose on what their best practice looks like and share their best practice because they're in competition with one another. And I think for education to be the best it can be in England, we have got to take those barriers down.
Mm, mm. You mentioned earlier about the inspectorate like working with leaders and teachers. Well, what does that actually look like though? If whether it's report cards, whether it's grades, whatever, what does that look like?
I think it is going to be just more conversations with school leaders coming into school and seeing what goes on a daily basis without having an inspection taking place, but actually being in the school, understanding the processes, understanding the challenges that we're facing, so that they can put all of that into context when they do come into schools. And I know most Ofsted inspectors are school leaders, but I think it's really important that everybody understands the context around primary school challenges, secondary school challenges, and different areas. We've all got different challenges. We're all facing different things, and to try and compare schools in any way, I think, creates its own complexities. But I think it's definitely about listening to school leaders, but getting into schools and truly understanding what's actually happening and what's going on.
I mean, that's difficult in a 2-day inspection, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
fundamentally, I know Mary was talking about the funding, and she talked about this report that's coming out tomorrow that's embargoed. I haven't read it myself, but I'm only going on what Mary said. I'm sure it's going to be very critical of Ofsted. I've also heard rumblings that the Ofsted Big Listen is coming out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure could be also very interesting, because that was very controversial at the time, which also drove the alternative Big Listen to come out. So it's going to be a very interesting day tomorrow, I think, in terms of the content that's gonna sort of appear. And it's I don't know whether the order of this has been driven by that. I don't know. By the government, in terms of, right, we know this report's going to come out, we know what it's going to say, let's preempt it, let's get in there first to sort of not dampen it a bit, but let's do something first, before it comes out, because from what Mary said, it's going to be very critical, I think, of Ofsted.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting tomorrow when all that comes out. But I think it's exciting times. It is exciting times. We have to be ready for change, obviously, with the new government. But I think time's going to tell, and it will be all about how much they listen to the profession. And, we have to be hopeful.
You did a major thing last year, didn't you? Do you want to tell people about that, what you did after the death of Ruth Perry?
So, I mean, I
They might not
tried.
know. They might not know.
I tried to say no to Ofsted only because of the fact that the news of Ruth Perry had only sort of just hit the news, but people who had worked near her and around her obviously knew of the news for a few months before that. So it was just the timing of it. And I thought, change needed to happen, and it wasn't right. And, another Ruth, that shouldn't have happened. Ruth shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that, there will be many teachers out there who think, why did this have to go on for 8? We're 19 months now since then. It's been a long time. Lots of battling, lots of conversations, lots of visits to the DFE for Julia Waters and friends. Lots of media wrangling from the former chief inspector. I mean, one thing that has been interesting today, there's not been a lot from Martin Oliver, I don't know whether that's intentional. I don't know whether that's. I don't know. He's just been like, I've heard more from Amanda Spielman today than Martin Oliver.
Yeah, which is odd.
It's just weird. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
I'm looking now. There's been no comment even in
No.
the press. There's no, literally, if you Google Martin Oliver Ofsted, there is nothing from Martin. There's literally just silence from Martin Oliver. And
But again, I think time's going to tell, isn't it? And I think over the next few days, we will hear more and see more of what the plans are. But I think, again, we just have to go back to a massive thanks to Julia and Edmund for their relentless, their relentless pressure and just their relentless action to try and get Ofsted to listen.
yeah, she's done. I mean, whatever your views are on Ofsted or Ofsted grades, I struggle to think that anyone would not look at the way that Julia Waters has managed to approach this
No.
with the level of calm and the level of the commitment and the level of care that she's taken with the decision she's made. I only know if it was me, I'd be going absolutely mad all the time. I'd be swearing. No, I wouldn't, maybe not swearing, but I'd be going mad. I'd be just really struggling to, like, you know me, Flora, and I would be like literally just wanting to fight someone. And she, as much as she's probably wanted to fight someone, she's held it together time and time and time and time again. She's never let her sort of emotions run away with her, so to speak, in any of the interviews and all the appearances and all the meetings and all the things. I mean, maybe she did behind closed doors with in the meetings, but I doubt it from seeing her the way she's been. So
she has incredible composure, and she is a remarkable woman. And I think that is what has made her the one to lead this, and the one who's, she is the one people have listened to. Which is why, she's been the one. She's been absolutely remarkable through the whole thing.
yeah, for sure. By the way, I'll say at this point, if anybody else wants to come in and share their views, their opinion on today, that would be fantastic. You can just hit the little microphone icon in the bottom left and get involved in the conversation. We're going to be dipping in and out for the next half an hour on Ofsted. We're going to talk about something a bit more lighthearted as well, which is good and bad inset days. But we'll also be dipping in and out, continuing the conversation on Ofsted grades being out as of today. So if you have a view on that, all you have to do is hit the little microphone icon in the bottom left, and just share your view, even if it's just a few sentences. Everyone's sort of welcome to share their two pennies. James, maybe we'll see if James is back. James, are you back, and can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hi, Tom. Yep.
Excellent. I think you're back now. I think we're okay.
Cool.
We had a few technical issues there a few minutes ago, but I think we're all right now. Flora, by the way, Flora, please stick around if you can. But I know you're a very busy person, so if you need to go, also go. But if you,
I will be leaving in a moment, Tom. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you so
no,
much.
that's perfect. No, it's brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. James, let's lighten it slightly now. And this was going to be the topic for tonight before everything kicked off at about 10 p.m. last night. So we were going to talk about inset days and the best and worst experiences we've had as teachers in inset days. And I know you commented on my original post, which was quite funny. So do you want to tell us about your best and worst experiences of inset days and what you think a good inset day should look like? Because you've got one tomorrow, haven't you?
I have one tomorrow. Yes.
You've got to be careful now, because you could say this is like my worst version of an inset day, and then it happens tomorrow, and it'd be really awkward.
Well, I struggle to find bad and good because they kind of all blend into one, to be honest. We did receive the agenda for tomorrow.
Okay.
But it's a nice way to start the year. I guess the head will do analysis of the results over the summer. Then we'll listen to new teachers introduce themselves.
Yeah.
But if we were to spend the whole day just talking about each other's summers, that would be fantastic. We could probably fill the day just with that. But I know that students will start coming in on staggered the rest of the week. So on a Wednesday we've got Year 7 and the 6th form coming in only. Then we've got the rest of the school on Thursday. So I guess it's most of tomorrow will be after the plenary presentations, will be around departments getting ready, scrambling around for books and resources and cupboard space, and planning autumn term, I guess.
How important, because you mentioned the head's message at the start on the agenda, which will be the same in nearly every school, I probably suspect. And I'll be honest, for me, some of those I remember really clearly, even from years ago. I remember one particularly bad one, which was in a September. It was after the summer, and I had been utterly stressed out about exam results in this particular year for months. Right, I'd been way too focused on it. I'd almost got obsessed with it, partly because of the culture that had been sort of built in that particular context around performance and the strong linking of student performance with teacher performance and teacher quality and all the rest of it. I was incredibly stressed, and on results day, my results, as they called them back then, because since then I've refused to use that phrase, but back then it was firmly about my results, my results. Right, but no, I'll finish it, Jay. I'll finish it. I'll finish it. So back then, they had a target, a departmental target, and my departmental, the history departmental target was like 3 or 4% below what it should have been. And I was absolutely bereft, right? Now, what I wanted on Inset Day was a message of genuine, this is not a reflection on you as professionals. Now, when I say I wanted that, I think there was a lot of people who wanted that. I don't think it was just me. But it was the opposite. It was like, talking about it being bad and failure and sort of standards and all the rest of it. And I just, I don't know how, I feel like that message is important on the first Inset back. Sorry, James, I'll let you speak now. Oh, have you gone again?
No, I'm here. I'm just reading off your captions, Tom.
Oh dear.
The leadership, I think, is important. So the ones I've experienced have been positive in the sense that all the school is together, we'll help each other through teaching and learning, we'll get everyone ready. And I guess up until our inspection back in mid-May, we had probably 18 months of getting ready for it. So when it came, it was, a military operation from our side, if you like. But I think you're right. The leader's speech is important. It's to rally the troops. It's got to be an empathetic and inspiring vision. And luckily, schools that are blessed with good leaders have that. But it does set the tone, and it's a collaborative effort. I don't think anyone should feel that either results or anything else is purely on their shoulders. So it's important that that's up front. Obviously, some departments will have done better than others, but I don't see crises like that. I see that the tasks to be performed, so everybody can improve. And I guess the best question that a leader can ask is, how can I help you improve? That'll be on the page tomorrow in our departments. How can we improve? So teamwork makes the dream work, I guess.
That's brilliant. Talking of teamwork making the dream work, this would be a good time for me to talk about our amazing partners at Teachers Talk Radio for a moment. John Catt Educational, massive supporters of Teachers Talk Radio. If you want to find out more about them, you can visit them at johncattbookshop.com. They're an amazing publisher of professional development resources for teachers that support great teaching and learning. You can get 20% off any John Catt book by using the code JCTTR2425. And you can get 20% off your order at thejohncattbookshop.com. So make sure you check that out. Our other partner on the show tonight or other supporter is Futurum Careers. If you haven't heard of Futurum Careers, they provide stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and shape. And we did a show with them last week. It was really amazing. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it. And we talked about career aspirations and how students go towards certain careers, like STEM or shape careers. And we talked about why they do that and how they do that. Now, Futurum Careers have a whole range of completely free resources, which you can actually sign up for on their website, which is futurumcareers.com. And you can download any of their free resources that you want from there. And it's really good. Like, genuinely, I've signed up, so they'll send you an email every week or two, and basically it has any free resources that arrive on their website you get into your inbox. So that's pretty cool. And the resources are designed by university academics, so they're all like scientific experts mainly from universities. So the resources are top quality. They're not just freelance resources. They're produced by the best people within certain fields in the universities. So it's well worth checking out, futurumcareers.com. So I think James has had to go again because he's dropped out. So I'm just going to give one final chance. If anybody out there wants to get involved in the conversation, we've obviously talked about Ofsted and the big news today that the grades have gone. And they've gone with immediate effect. So the subgrades will stay, but the main grades have gone. The headline figure grades have now gone completely, which has obviously been massive news. We've heard from Mary Bowstead, we've heard from Flora Cooper, executive head teacher. We've heard a little bit from James there, who's dropped out, but we've heard from a lot of people on this. We've also heard from me. I've had my say on it as well, and I've asked questions around what this means for the profession. Is it great news? Is it good news but could be better? Is it actually bad news? I mentioned a poll in the Telegraph this morning with 22,000 votes, and 64% have said it's a bad idea to take away the one-word grades. Now, obviously, that is from one newspaper that is right-leaning, with 20,000 people replying. But I still think it's worth a mention because, within the profession, we sometimes can get quite blinkered in our own sort of views, and that's understandable because it is a bubble we're in. But there's a lot of people out there who are not thinking the same way that a lot of sort of teachers do, or people within the teaching profession do, about Ofsted grades. So it's going to be interesting what the next year holds while Labour work out what they're going to do for next September in terms of the report card system that they've got planned. I don't know what that's. I mean, I guess it's going to be a bit like a scorecard. I guess it's going to have lots of different areas on it. I guess that there's still going to be 2-day inspections. I think that side of things is probably going to continue as it is. I guess what Mary Bowstead was saying is something I personally would ask as well, is do we sort of go from the frying pan into the fire a little bit? Do we go from one thing that was bad into another thing that's going to be bad with regards to the report card system? We don't know that until it comes out. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to work in terms of the inspections themselves, but we know that there's a lot of detail that will need to be very carefully worked out. I think one of the things that we will talk about, I'm sure, on Teachers Talk Radio a lot over the next year will be how this actually looks on the ground. Now they've got rid of that headline grade. What's it going to look like on the ground in terms of the subgrades that are still in place? Will those who embrace that high stakes accountability continue to embrace it, but now embrace it with the subgrades as the main sort of like lever or the main pronouncement of their own quality? That's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Of course, it would be wonderful if people want to have their say, then tweet us at TT Radio Official. Let us know what your opinions are. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of this. This will be available as a podcast, of course, so you'll be able to download it on any of the podcast platforms that Teachers Talk Radio is on. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean. And by the way, everyone listening out there, it would be amazing if you left us a review on those platforms. If you like listening to us even once a year, however often you listen, once a week, once a month, once a year, it doesn't matter. If you like what we do, please drop us a review. It would be greatly appreciated from anybody on whatever podcast platform you are on. Of course, subscribe to us as well. And check out the listen back page on the website, because we've got shows coming up this week where this is going to be a topic for discussion again. So we've got Lucy and Hannah tomorrow evening, who I'm sure will be talking more about this in some way, shape or form. We've got Brent and Adam on Thursday night, who I'm sure, again, will probably have their say on this, amongst other things. And of course, we've got the weekly review on every Sunday morning. And this Sunday morning will be no different at 10 a.m, which will be live with Paul Hazard and guests. And I'm sure that this Ofsted story is going to keep rolling this week. We know that tomorrow, we know on the down low, we know that the Ofsted Big Listen is going to come out tomorrow, the results of it. So that is going to be, I'm sure another monumental day to see what the results of the self review, if you like, that Ofsted did. It was a survey they asked all school leaders to participate in, the Big Listen, if you don't know what it is. And basically school leaders were invited to answer a long series of questions about Ofsted. The criticism at the time was that those questions only allowed for certain answers that Ofsted wanted to hear. Ofsted said, no, this is actually about hearing what the profession wants, hearing what teachers want. Of course, the criticism was that the questions were not giving them enough opportunity to say what they really thought. Many people were encouraged to use the comments. And of course, on the back of that, the alternative Big Listen was launched, which was almost, a counter to the Ofsted Big Listen, to say, we don't believe in the way this has been put together. So that is coming out tomorrow. There is also the report by Christine Gilbert coming out tomorrow, which is basically a report that was commissioned with Christine leading it, leading this independent review into Ofsted. That is also going to come out tomorrow. And from what Mary Bowstead has just said, I haven't read it myself yet, but from what Mary has said, it's going to be very, very critical of Ofsted. I believe it's under embargo at the moment. It certainly hasn't shown up online yet, but it's going to be very critical tomorrow of Ofsted in lots of different ways. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that report says exactly. And again, I'm sure Hannah and Lucy will cover some or all of this tomorrow evening, live at 7:30 on TTR. So that'll be, tomorrow's going to be another big day in the education world, certainly, to see what that report says. I mean, I do wonder whether today's announcement on the grades was almost to preempt the report. The report, if we think what it is, I mean, Mary's read it. She says it's very critical. If it is very critical, have they preempted that by putting out the news about the top grade going today to sort of quell more calls for major reform on the back of the report that's going to come out tomorrow? Because it might be that, the report comes out and there's another massive call for change and reform off the back of that. It's going to be interesting to see, it's going to be intriguing to understand how the profession's going to sort of react to that as well when it comes out tomorrow. So I'm going to leave it here, but thank you very much everybody for listening along as always, and I'll be back next Monday night at 7:30 UK time. Thanks everyone, and take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.